grammar and syntax. This is where that GNS kind of abbreviation I alluded to earlier is referring to. So, what is the importance of good grammar? Well, it's a tool used for clear conveyance of a message. If you don't convey yourself correctly or in a way that grammatically just makes sense, then you could alienate your reader, which is an unfortunate side effect of having poor grammar and syntax. But if you have good grammar and syntax, a benefit to that is a more professional appearance. So, the lesson of the day, we're going to be talking parts of speech. This is part one, referring to nouns. Now, what is a noun? I do have a definition up here, and if you were to look it up, it'd be a similar definition. But when I was reading a book from a grammatician, it's not as concrete as you would think what a noun actually is. But for a general rule of thumb and a good understanding of what it is, you could say it is something that identifies a person, place, thing, or idea. Now, I added that idea there at the end because some things aren't as concrete as a thing when you think object. Now, there are 8 common functions of a noun in a sentence. I'll have you take a peek at those right there. I'll just read it off in a sec. So, you have the subject, direct object, indirect object, object of the preposition. You have your predicate nominative, which is sometimes referred to as the subject complement. You have the object complement. You have the appositive, and you have the vocative, which sometimes is referred to as direct address. So, first, let's talk about what a subject is. Now, it's something that performs the associated action of the verb, or is, with respect to the rest of the sentence. You'll see what I'm talking about in example 2, and usually occurs at the beginning of the sentence. Not always, as you'll see in example 3, but I have 3 examples here. Example 1, Sam washed his car with a dirty sponge. Sarah is a very talented woman. Now, is isn't really an action verb, but Sarah is still the subject in this case. Whenever I look into the street, children are playing without a care. This is an example of the subject not being at the beginning. Next up, we have the direct object. This is the noun that receives the action or is directly affected by the verb done by the subject of the sentence. Example 4, the boy tossed the ball as high as he could into the air. When the janitor came, he found a mess. That one really illustrates what I mean by is directly affected by the action done by the subject. And then you have example 6, I do not like asparagus as much as other vegetables out there. So when you have a subject, verb, and direct object, you have a very basic sentence construction. Next, we have the indirect object, typically referring to a recipient, the noun. In this case, it could be a noun phrase as well. Most of these can be. Affected by the action but not acting as the direct object. Now, I have a little asterisk there, and this is important because it's referring to this note right here. Some grammaticians hold the idea that when the indirect object appears in the to plus a noun or noun phrase, it is no longer an indirect object, but instead an object of the preposition. Now, the way I see it, for the practices, it's fine if you word it as the to version, and we'll see that in example 8, but example 7 first. I didn't want you to tell Veronica that. Now, what is being told? That. Veronica is not being told, but she is affected by the telling of that. Therefore, she acts as the indirect object. Example 8. I want you to give this article to the governor. The article is the thing being given. It's being given to the governor. The governor would be acting as the indirect object. For those who say that it is the object of the preposition because of the preposition to, a different way to word this sentence in order to appease that would be, I want you to give the governor this article. In that case, it satisfies both. And then example 9, please hand the teacher last night's homework. Homework is being handed in, not the teacher. Object of the preposition is a noun following a preposition, which will be defined in the future. But most of the time you will be able to recognize it. I think the only ones I'm going to be using in these examples is around, to, and with, and up. So just look for those for the examples that I'm going to show. In example 10, I didn't really want to go to the party. To is the preposition, party is the object. 11, around that block is an interesting event going on right now. Now, this is an interesting thing to look at because the subject is an omitted there. And we'll talk about that later. Example 12, going up the road should take us to Jean's place. Going up the road is the subject. Predicate nominative, otherwise known as a subject complement, is a noun that follows a copulative verb. Just think of it as linking verb. That's the typical wording that we use in order to have a better understanding of it. Used to describe the subject, like verb forms of to be. This man right here is my friend. We saw an example when we were talking about subject. That woman is a very talented woman. Is, talented woman. That last woman would be, the predicate nominative, and the other would be the subject. These suggestions seem to be mandates. Mandates is going to be your predicate nominative. Is this woman your mother? Now, although the order of the sentence is different, mother is still going to be acting as a predicate nominative. Questions often switch the order. Object complement renames the direct object or identifies what the direct object has become because of some action. Example 16, did you seriously make him your secretary? Now, he is the one being made. Secretary is what he has become. Therefore, secretary is the object complement. It complements him. So, example 17, moving on to another one. Her peers appointed Cassandra president of the book club. President is going to be your object complement. Cassandra was the one who was appointed. She is the direct object, president, the object complement. Example 18, we considered him a fine general. Now, it doesn't always have to be becoming something, but also consider is a trigger word right there that can key you into the possibility of having an object complement, like general, because he is the one being considered. General is what's describing him. Now we have an appositive. It is set near another noun or noun phrase to explain or identify it. Now, we usually use it to talk about if there's a common name, for example. Not everyone's going to know that person. So what we do is we say what their profession is or something like that. So, for example, number 19, we have Miss Simmons, the math instructor, gave an in-depth lecture on hyperbolas. Now, not everyone knows who Miss Simmons is, but in reference to what the speaker's talking about, she is the math instructor. Number 20, did you know that the award went to Rogers, the janitor? Janitor is referring to Rogers. Renames, kind of explains who he is. 21, the finest place on earth to live. Gotham has a crime issue. Now, finest place on earth to live. Place is renamed Gotham, identifying it, instead of just renaming it. Now, here's a related syntax lesson. Very important and often, unfortunately, not used and can lead to some confusion. The Oxford comma. It is used in a list to separate the last of all things listed. So, for example, I invited to the meeting 2 barbarians, Washington and Jefferson. Now, if you don't have the Oxford comma there, Washington and Jefferson is considered the appositive for 2 barbarians, and changes the meaning of the sentence. So basically, you're calling Washington and Jefferson barbarians. Instead of inviting 4 people, you're just inviting 2, and you're even insulting them. But basically, that is why the Oxford comma is important, and unfortunately not used as much as it should be. Also, interesting thing to note, referring to commas again, the appositive is usually set off by commas. That is how you're able to tell that it's there. It's a kind of a trigger. Vocative, direct address, names the one spoken to in the sentence. Now, what does that mean? Basically, if you are telling someone to do something, you name them. That way, the people know to whom you're talking. So, for example, if I were to just say, can you file this report by Friday afternoon? And I kind of just set it in the air and no one knew to whom I was referring when I was giving that order, it would be very confusing. So what I say is I add a vocative talking about to whom I'm talking, Jerry. Jerry, can you file this report by Friday afternoon? Jerry is the vocative. 23, we have soldiers, never surrender. In this case, it is a command, but if you take the comma away, you're just saying soldiers never surrender, which is a statement. It is no longer a command. So that's an important thing to note there. The comma is important for the vocative. And even more so in example 24, a very short one. Let's eat, Grandma. You're talking to Grandma, but if you don't have the comma there, you unintentionally commit a bit of a cannibalistic statement. So, commas are very important. Make sure to use them when appropriate, when there's a natural pause. Now, here is a practice. Go ahead, write down your answers on a separate sheet of paper, maybe plug them in on your phone, whatever you seem to have. We just have 10 examples here. Each function is used once. Now, just a quick little recap. If you were kind of dozing off, I don't really blame you. But the 8 functions in order that I showed them: subject, direct object, indirect object, object of the preposition, object complement, predicate nominative, appositive, and vocative. Those are your 8 options. Each of one is used at least once. As you can see, there are 10 examples, so be careful. It can appear more than once. I'm going to go ahead and give you about a minute more if you already started. If you need a little extra time, go ahead, pause the video. No shame in that. It shouldn't take too long if you were taking notes. Also make sure that you are only identifying the function of the underlined noun. So for number 1, that's choice. Number 2, boys. Number 3, dolls. Number 4, Ted. Number 5, fit. Number 6, Thomas. Number 7, announcer. Number 8, ravioli. Number 9, instructor. And number 10, sheriff. All right, so hopefully you're done. Let's go ahead and take a look at those answers. So check your answers, make sure you got them right. If not, there is a little brief explanation next to it. So object complement is for the first one. Choice describes but does not rename it. Number 2 was the vocative. The speaker is addressing the boys, and the vocative is set off by a comma. So, like I mentioned earlier, comma is very important to identify that. Object of the preposition. Following the preposition with, dolls is the object of the preposition with implication of use of a noun. Object of the preposition again for number 4. So remember when I said be careful. Ted, following the preposition with, implying accompaniment. Number 5, predicate nominative, or you could have written subject complement. Seem is a linking verb, or, as mentioned earlier, could be referred to as a copulative verb. Just call it a linking verb. And a good fit describes you. Number 6 was subject. Thomas is the actor of would reconsider. Number 7, indirect object. The announcer is not being given, but instead receives the pick. Number 9, a positive instructor renames Rebecca to explain who she is. Number 10 is subject again. Appointed is a past participle modifying the subject, sheriff. So sheriff is still going to be the subject of that sentence. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the assignment that I would recommend to do for next time. From the Great American Short Stories book, which I showed on camera briefly. That's what it looks like. It's from the Fall River Press, excuse me. I want you to go ahead and read The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, pages 13 to 24, until you get to the phrase, full of the importance and hurry of his mission. That's going to be the stopping point. And take notes if you need to. Note the characters, the setting, general plot up to that point, and unfamiliar terms. It should not take more than an hour. There's a little note, that's where you can find that book. That's just all you have to look up. Look for a similar image to the book that I showed you. Personally, I did do the assignment. It took me about 40 minutes to read it very carefully and about 15 minutes to write thorough notes. By doing one, you shouldn't have to do the other. Keep that in mind when you're reading it. The grammar assignment I have associated with this lesson is going to be writing an example of each noun function in a sentence for each. So you should have 8 sentences. You can write it in a paragraph form, although, this is more just a practice for you. So I wrote it should take 20 minutes maximum, probably take you around 10 if you're quick. 1 sentence per function. Underline the chosen noun. Not going to give an assigned topic. You can be as creative as you want. Label them or list them in the order in which you write them at the end. And I have below some appropriate abbreviations that appeared on the slides prior. If you need a little refresher, you can go ahead, jump back to the time when I started the grammar lesson. But you have all 8 functions right there. Those are approved abbreviations. From what I can tell, those are generally understood when referring to nouns. And that's going to do it for the lecture. Thank you all so much for watching. I know this was a pretty lengthy lecture. It took about an hour to do. But I want to thank you for sticking around. At the very end here, I have a kind of cheeky little quotation from Washington Irving. A kind heart is a fountain of gladness, making everything in its vicinity freshen into smiles. As well as an interesting picture, which shows the church that was mentioned in the story about Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.